All right. How are you guys doing? Good morning to most of you, because I know you're in East Coast or somewhere really far from me. I'm currently in Dublin, Ireland, so it's 3 p.m. for me, and I guess it's very early for you guys. But I did have my coffee because after lunch always need coffee. So thanks, Jacob. Thanks, Mac, for having me here. It's quite nice to have an event, a virtual event, because we can get people from everywhere in the world and stay safe. And it's quite nice that you guys have organized this. So that's really nice. So, guys, I'm gonna kick it off, and I'm probably the first one to have like the actual. We had Jacob starting, but this is gonna be the first talk. I know you guys are gonna have a lot of content coming up. Um, but I decided to talk about leveraging communities to boost sales. And it's not like usually what the topic would be, the topic I would talk about be. I'm usually talking about support communities, and I'll tell you why in a second. But let me introduce you to myself first. So my name is Ed. I'm originally from Brazil, so even though I'm in Ireland, you wouldn't get from the accent. This accent is definitely not Irish at all, and neither Brazilian, I'd say. I've been here for 12 years. And I've been working with communities for quite a while. So I worked with Dropbox for 5 years. I worked at Zynga Games before that for about 4 years. And I had like some other gigs going on that were kind of community related. But I'd say formally about 9, almost 10 years working with communities for support most of the times. But I've seen that a lot of people are just getting started with communities, like it's their first or second year. And I'll give you good news. When I created eDublin is like the largest community for Brazilian expats abroad. And when I started it in 2008, I had no idea what community was. I had no idea what strategy for communities were. I had zero, like, think about this, 2008. I think no one has ever thought about building a community, thinking that this was a community. They were just working on building it like organically. And it happened to be probably my most successful project as a community manager. So guess what? It doesn't matter how much you're going to learn. It may be that your organic project is going to be the one that's going to take off. So that was eDublin. I also wrote a book, and then you can add like a lot of titles: mentor, investor, podcaster, dog walker. Actually, I walk my own dog. I'm passionate for Zoom meetings, and I'm not. But it's all of that. That's me. That's Ed. And so, yeah, I'm going to talk today, as I said, you are going to talk about leveraging your communities to boost sales and why that, if I came from all of this support world, because I feel that we're now in times where we need to be really smart about how we engage communities and how can we get the most out of it. And that's something that I've done quite recently, and it worked really well for me. And I wanted to share with you guys. Maybe that's going to give you guys some ideas on what to do, right? If you guys have any questions, any comments, feel free to add in the comments, and I'll make sure to try and follow up here. But I'll keep to the script and make sure I keep to my time. But it's always nice to have people engage, and so I'm going to have a glance at this chat here and there. But let me get started first, right? Oh, look at New York. Oh, people from New York. I love New York. I love you people. I met people from California there as well. Quite nice. Cool. So let's get started, guys. So to actually start to leverage your community to drive sales, it's quite simple, actually. You need to do 5 things. You need to have authority, reciprocity, ritual. You need to eliminate all objections, and then social proof. And I'm going to talk to you about each of them and give you real examples of what I've done. Worked for me. Okay. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. I'll make sure to have a look at the chat when I can. So let's talk about the first thing, authority. So how do you build it, and what is authority when you talk about communities online? So usually authority can be imposed, but it can also be earned. If it's imposed, maybe you're like a police officer, maybe you are a firefighter, maybe you are a doctor, maybe you have like a nice badge on your chest, and that represents authority, and then you can impose and then take orders on that. But if you earn it, usually that happens online, is through doing a lot of things. But authority is essentially perception. It's essentially what people see on you. So what do I mean by that? So perception is essentially, imagine this triangle that I built there. So this is the triangle of perception. It's actually an actual thing. Anytime you think about something, you tend to say something and you tend to do something about it. And when you do something about it, people will perceive you as something based on what you just done or what you said. And that will influence other things you're going to think about, and then other things you're going to talk about, and other things you're going to do. And that goes in a cycle, right? So a perception of someone who has authority is essentially every time you pronounce or you do something or you communicate something that you're actually thinking about or doing, that will build that perception on people. And that's usually done through content. When we're building content online, we usually build authority. So what do I mean by that? How can I do that? So here's the trick for you guys, because every time I go to a talk, everyone talks to me like, oh, you should write content. It should be great content. It should be beautiful. And you're like, okay, come on, that's fine. You're telling to me the obvious thing. I know it's like it needs to be good, but how do I actually build something that's actually meaningful? And how do I actually build authority over content? So here's a little trick for you guys. That's a content degree pyramid I just built, and I hope it works for you guys. So there are a few ways you can actually create or curate content. One, which is I would say like the bottom of the pyramid, is the easiest way to do it, which is essentially curation of content, like the raw curation of content. What do I mean by that is when you literally click share, when you share content and you're sharing or you like it or you're like, oh, this is great, boom, there you go. That's the first, let's say, degree of content sharing. The second level is when you actually put some analysis on it. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that there's like news that SpaceX launched, well, that actually happened, right? Launched a new rocket. And then you can just share like, oh, that was great. Well done, Elon. Or you can go and say, well, this actually represents X, Y, and Z. And you can put a little bit of an analysis on that. And then the third level is when you actually bring some recommendation over your analysis. So let's say that you say like, okay, that happened with the rocket and SpaceX and so on and so forth. Here's my analysis. And then based on that, I would recommend you guys to buy stocks from Tesla, because as a consequence of this and this and that, Elon Musk may bring some value to Tesla and so on and so forth. So therefore, I would recommend you to buy stock. So that's like a level of content creation that requires you to run an analysis and build recommendation over your analysis. And the next level of that is when you actually create that content. It's not only analyzing someone else's creation, but your own creation. It tends to be harder. So if you look at this pyramid, the further up you are, the higher your authority to build something, because you're going to actually share meaningful content, and actually increases the difficulty of it. And because it increases difficulty, you will find out that only 1% of people will create content. And then about 10% of people will actually do the other 3 steps, which is curating content. And you probably know that is the 90-10-99-1 actually rule of the internet, where 1% of the internet users will create content, 9% will curate content, and 90% will actually just lurk it. They will just watch the content being created. So if you want to be on the top 1%, that's the first thing. You create content. You could be, it's not a problem, but it's going to be, as I said, less likely that you're going to be building authority if you're not trying to create something or build analysis or build recommendations over what you see on the internet. So that's the first thing. If you're building that, you're starting to build value. So what did I do? Let me show you an example. I know it's in Portuguese. Don't worry, that's not going to affect the understanding of the content here. I created a post on LinkedIn because I wanted to drive something around career. So I used LinkedIn as a platform. I didn't go to a community just yet. I went on LinkedIn and created valuable content. I shared knowledge. I shared something that was a creation of mine. And then people start to engage, right? And I start to build followers on that. So I'm using someone else's terrain. I'm using like a rented space. That means like I'm not using my own community just yet. So that was the first thing I've done. Second one is reciprocity. So what do I mean by that? It's simply give first and then you receive. So it sounds easier said than done. Everyone says the same thing. So let me give you an example of what do I mean by give first to then receive. Several ways you can do that. You can offer free trials. You can offer help. You can donate. You can volunteer. You can give career advice. You can give any advice. You can mentor people. You can help in many ways. You can always do that. And every time you're doing it, you're adding value because you're offering something that will help someone else. Doesn't matter if that person is your audience yet or not, you're helping out. So what did I do? I offered to give mentorship to 3 people, individual mentorship to 3 people for free. That's it. It's free. People should just like go and say like, I want to be mentored by you. And then I offered that for them. And then essentially you can go and say, okay, I'm up for it. So I would pick 3 people out of a couple of thousand who applied for it. And that was my way of giving first before asking for anything. There was one catch. Everyone who was joining in out of these 3 people, they would have to share, the sessions we would have. They would have to go live. They would have to be shared live, which means that other people could watch our mentoring sessions. So it's not only giving individual mentorship, but everyone else was watching. It was like a big brother. But to watch it, they would have to join a closed space, not paid, but closed space. And that's the Facebook group that I created. It had like 1,400 members eventually. 1,400, that's what the number there. So 1,400 members who wanted to watch, like is a big brother who wanted to watch the mentorship. So then that's when I'm starting to build a closed space. That's when I'm starting to look at a community as a potential to drive this very specific thing. I'm not trying to build like to boil the ocean by driving this massive community. It's just people interested in that. That's it. So I moved from LinkedIn to Facebook because Facebook gives me better tools. LinkedIn groups sucks. It's really bad. So I wouldn't recommend you using it. So Facebook groups has more features in that sense. It's not a nice community yet. I don't feel like it's the best one yet. But it's better than what I had on LinkedIn. So I moved people there so they could watch the live sessions. That was the second thing. And then ritual, that's the third thing. So how do you build ritual? So if you remember, I'm really big fan of Whose Line Is It Anyway, which is a show where everything is made up and the points don't matter. And that's a ritual. That's how he starts. Like Drew would always start like that. And I always had a way to start my talks as well when it was going live. So a ritual could be something that exists and you just take advantage of it. It could be something that you personalize. It could be like a big virtual high five you give to people, a big shout, something that you shout like, whoo, whatever, but it has to be natural. It has to be something that it just comes out from you and people will be like, oh, I can do that. So what did I do? Every time I was going live, I would start with a song and the song had meaning related to that live session. So I'll give you an example. One of the talks, I was talking about transferable skills. And then I used the song from Pearl Jam that's called Go. I love Pearl Jam, by the way. And this song was written by the drummer. The actual melody was created by the drummer. He was playing guitar and he came up with the melody, and it's a beautiful song. And why did I use that song? Well, one, because I love it. But second, because when I was telling this story, I was talking about transferable skills. It was a skill to, like, he didn't have to stick to his drumming sessions. He actually picked the guitar. He came up with a song. And it was beautiful. And it's in the album. And it's a great song. So that's what I meant by using the ritual. So I used songs like to start off. I created a story about the song and actually shared, like it's a real story, it's not faked. I created a real story about this song, and then people started to really connect with me, and they felt like, oh, that's great. Okay, now we can start the content. So it's usually a quite nice way to do a ritual, so people feel like they're connected. They're like, oh yeah, now we are in the zone. Let's get started. Okay. And then the fifth point is to eliminate any objections, because every time you're going to do something, there's going to be an objection. So whenever you guys came up with the summit, someone may have said, oh, it's too early, I can't do it. Oh, I have to pay. Oh, sugar. Oh, I know it's free, but I know there's a package where you can pay. But then timing could be an issue, or it could be like, oh, it's all in English. Oh man, no, I'm not a native speaker. It's going to be an issue for me. Or I have something else coming up. There's always an objection. When I created this, I had a lot of objections. When I was doing the mentorship, people were like, oh, but I'm not going to get a job abroad. Oh, but the crisis, oh, the pandemic, it's not going to happen. So I had to break the objections and eliminate them. So how did I do it? Again, content. I started to create content that would address and solve these problems, solve all the objections. So as you can see now, I was on LinkedIn. I started to move into Telegram. Why? Because I'm using different social spaces, because I want to make sure I get different people in different situations who are quite used to certain things. So in our Telegram group, I started to drive content that had like a specific goal, because I know they were more engaged, because usually Telegram, which is not widely used in Brazil, tends to be for very, very niche groups. So I knew it was like a smaller group, but very engaged. And then I used Instagram. And on Instagram, I would create stories, I would create videos on the IGTV, and I would interview people, and I would break that kind of objection by sharing like a story or something that would solve their problems, or something that would be like, okay, this happened with this other person, this is how we solved it. And that eliminates objections. Again, look at this. I was LinkedIn, then Facebook, YouTube Lives, now Telegram. Why am I exploring everything? Because you don't want to be using one, put on your eggs in one basket. If something changes, algorithmic or whatever it is, you're screwed because you're depending on that someone else's platform. So I'm using different platforms, and I know how can I engage in different ways. If you're just getting started, maybe stick with one or two, but don't put all your eggs in one basket. That's what I would say. And then the sixth element is the social proof. So what is a social proof? It's essentially how do you tell the story without being you who is telling the story. It's like testimonials you would get. How did I do that? Same thing. I would interview people that had a mentorship with me, or people who had seen this content that I created for free and they really enjoyed it, or that helped them in some way. And I would interview them. I would ask them to share their stories. And really, guys, don't be scared to ask. If you create something really meaningful and valuable, you can go on later and say, hey, would you mind sharing, like, how did that help you? And you can actually help them by giving them a template even. You can say, hey, this content has helped me in X, Y, and Z, or I had this issue before, and then they can tell whatever issue they had. And this is what I did after reading this or watching this or listening to this. And they will do it for you. They will do it for you. Even if it's like 10% of people who watched it or listened to it, they will do it. And that's what I did. I created like IGTVs, I created like interviews, and I start to post it because these are social proofs. Plus, they're also eliminating objections, because when people see that other people like them had issues and got it solved, they'll be like, oh, maybe this community has a value for me. Maybe this guy's building something out of value here. Maybe I should join him. And that's when you create your meaningful community and you start to boost sales. Okay? Then I'm telling you, every time I'm talking to you here, I'm talking about stories, right? I'm talking about stories from people who had situations. I'm giving stories when I'm doing my lives. Every single time I'm doing stories, because stories are super powerful. And the stories can come in different ways. And again, let me share another example. When I'm creating content, in whatever way channel that I'm creating this content, I'm creating in different forms. It's not only text, it's not only video. If you see there on the left-hand side on the Telegram chat, I created an audio. I just created an audio, 3-minute audio, like I would do like a WhatsApp audio, a Telegram audio, or Messenger audio. I literally just spoke for 3 minutes, explaining them something. And that was a way to engage, because this is really close to connecting with them. They're listening to me. They're like, they can hear my voice. And it's raw, it's pure, there's no editing. It's not a podcast, it's just me talking. And then I did a live video. When LinkedIn launched new features, I went live and I started to test them. But I was telling a story as well. It wasn't just, here's a feature and here's how you do it. It wasn't like robotic. It wasn't, corporate. It was just me talking. And people were like, oh, this is super valuable. This helps me a lot. And again, what do I mean by that? Remember, the first point, I'm creating value. I'm creating content that people be like, oh, this is good. And that's the only reason why people join your community. It's because you can add value to their lives. If you're not adding value, they're not going to stay. It's not because your brand is amazing. I mean, to be honest, rarely you're going to have a brand that's so good that you're going to join a community. I love Apple, and I didn't join their community. And I won't join until I find some need for me to join. I think the only time I went to their forum was to ask a question. And the forum is not a community. That's why I'm telling you, if you drive value, people will be connected through that value, and they will start to engage and then start to build up on that. And that's how you're going to get your sales to boost. So again, when I'm telling about stories, and look at that, there are a couple of ways you can do stories. You can do quests, you can do strategy, it can be the underdog, and it can be the hero's journey. That's probably the most popular. It's all stories. It's all ways in how you can connect with them. Because if you build stories, you break the functional and you start to build on the emotional. And people will be like, that makes sense. That connects to my life. That's how I would think about this. Every time you have a question, usually people will go in and ask questions like, oh, you know what? So yeah, once I was doing this with my boss and blah, 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 blah. And they'll tell you a story. When they ask a question, they usually tell you a story. And it's quite funny because they don't even realize they're asking a story before they ask the question. It's rare to have someone who's really to the point. And anyway, so what happened after I did all of this? You're going to see what the results were, right? So that's what we got when we started selling and then ended selling. So we started at a day and we ended at a specific day. I think it was like last week at some point. So we had a boost because, again, I was driving value. And then at some point I told them, look, I can do more for you, but you have to pay. And when I did that, they were comfortable because they were like, yeah, I know, because I know you can add value. I know you're doing a lot of really good things. And now if you're going to charge me, it's okay. And it's okay. And here's my here's my credit card. So they pay for it because they know there's value. If you give them something, as I said, if you give them first, they will start to give you back. They will look at value. They'll be like, okay, I can pay for that. But why did the sales end? Because you need to do the sixth point, which is a bonus point for you guys. Scarcity. It's essentially putting an end to it. Imagine that you have a swimming pool at home. If you have a swimming pool at home, you're not going to be swimming in your swimming pool every day. If you didn't have it, and if you ask someone who's never been into like a place with a swimming pool, and they go there, first thing they're going to do is jump in the pool and stay there, enjoy the most of they can, because they know it's going to be over after they're leaving that place. Where if you have it at home, you probably, if you have a swimming pool at home, you're probably going to be like, oh, maybe last time I was swimming there was, I don't know, a month ago or so. It's usually like that. If you have a bath in your bathroom, you usually don't use your bath because you're like, nah, I have it there. So you need to build scarcity as well. That's how people build seeing the value, because they know if they miss it, it's gone. That's it. And then you can open up again. So as I said, guys, it's actually simple. It's very simple. It's just not easy. It's simple to do it, but not easy. So let me remind you again. You want to make sure that you have authority, and I did that by building content that has value. You're building like value to them. So by reciprocity, you're actually creating something that you're going to give them first. You always give first. Don't ask, give them first, and then it will come back to you. Third point was ritual. Create something that will connect them together. So if you're going to do like talks, it doesn't matter, guys. It doesn't matter if you're talking to different audiences. Create your signature. Like if you start, I don't know, if every time you're going to start a talk, you have to shout like, "Hahoo!" You go, "Hahoo!" Do that, because people will remember that. Every time they'll hear that, "Hahoo!" They'll be like, "Ooh, this is Ed's shout. This is Ed. I know him." That is it. Create something that is memorable. They'll be always remembering you, and that's how you're going to create that bond on the community. Then you eliminate objections. Every time someone's going to come up with an excuse, you eliminate that by showing them that there's a way around it. Social proof. And then my bonus, which is always something good to do, is to give bonuses. Always give them more than they ask for. Why is Amazon so good? Because they tell you it's going to come in 2 days, and then next day it's in your house. So it's like, I give you like some expectation, but I'm always beating that expectation because I'm coming faster than what I tell you what I'm doing. So if I'm telling you I'm going to give you 5 tips and I give you 6, it'd be like, oh my God, that was great, Ed. Where if I was to actually give you, say like, I'm going to give you 6 tips and I just give 5, it'd be like, this guy, not sure. Always give more. Always give more. And that was the bonus on the scarcity. So that's it, guys. After giving you a lot, it's time to ask you. So you can follow me if you want to see more. And I see that there's an actual couple of questions coming up here. I will make sure to answer some of them before we just wrap up. And let me see. Okay, let me get it out. So yeah. So Jacob, really good point there. Preemptive, create content to address objectives. Really, really good. Yes. Yeah. I know it sounds obvious, but it's not obvious. I know it's so rarely do you have a brand that's so good that they want to join your community. Yeah, that's it, Jacob. That's it. Tool for brand communities. Okay, that was just like an ad, is it? Why was there a bump of sales during the weekend? There was not a bump. The bump was the week before. Was on, let me show you again. That was on a Thursday. And then the weekend is when we actually have a drop. That little bump here was a Sunday night, if I'm not wrong. And usually Sunday nights are good times for people to figure out their week. And then they tend to look back at like, oh, maybe I should buy. So that's why there was like a tiny bump, but not even close to what happened to the day before. Okay. Let's see if there was something else here. Yeah, it may sound obvious, not obvious. Yeah, that's it, Pooja. It's like, it's essentially that progression. And again, guys, I'm talking about sales because that was the goal behind this. But I think Jacob was really on point there. You always have to have an objective, and don't be afraid to share that objective with your audience, or be clear about that objective, because that will help you. It's almost like if this is your North Star, you're going to build content, you're going to build and understand objections around that objective and around that North Star. That's also going to help your team, if you have a team around it, to be focused on, okay, what are we trying to achieve out of this? What's the main goal behind this? If you just go and like, okay, let's build a community because it's going to be cool, people are going to engage, and then eventually buy something, you're like, this is not clear. If it's not clear to you, it's not going to be clear to anyone else. If you as a community manager is not clear on what you want, no one else is going to be clear about it. So be sure you're clear, okay? Where do you find inspiration for your content? You know what's funny? It's everything that I'm doing content-wise is essentially things that I had as issues or problems before that I was trying to solve. Once I solved them, I decided to share. And it's never going to be enough, because you're always going to have some new problems in life that you have to share and learn how to do it and then share. And that to me feels very natural. That's why I don't have problems creating content. I create essentially daily posts on LinkedIn. I create 2 or 3 videos per week, daily posts on Instagram as well. Yeah, quite a lot of content that I create. And then I'm also on Telegram, on Facebook, Instagram, and so on and so forth. It's quite a lot. Can a company with a support-focused community easily evolve into a lead generation community, or is it better to start fresh? You can, Jacob. Actually, have you heard of GiftGaff? It's a big case. It's probably one of the most successful cases that are different in UK. It's a SIM card company, and they had a support community that became a sales community. And eventually, all their community members are either supporting or selling, because if you think about it, it's quite close to each other. Like every time you want to buy something, you may come up with questions, and the questions may be objections. And if you're actually looking for support, that's when you're closer to learn. And the more you learn, the more likely you are to buy. So if you're asking a question, it's because you're either engaged as a customer or you're either engaged as a prospect. So if you're a prospect, you can buy. If you're a customer and you're happy, you become a social proof. So it's all connected. So you can actually leverage both, and I think GiftGaff would be a good example. Let's see, Daniel, when you moved your community from LinkedIn to Facebook, what percentage moved with you? So you know what? That's actually a good point. On LinkedIn, it wasn't a community. On LinkedIn, it was just me publishing on my own profile. So it wasn't a community. It wasn't gated. I had no way to know that. I had ways to measure views, but views could be anyone. Likes could be anyone. And that's why likes, shares didn't buy any product. You need to start to gate that somehow and measure that. For me, the way to measure was like, let me bring them into a place where I have more control. And that was a Facebook group. To be very, very honest, I'm still not happy with Facebook groups. So I'm very likely going to move into something like Discord, because that's where I have more control over kind of like units, like channels. And I can build content for each of them. I can create closed channels for some members. I can promote some of them. It's a little bit more control. It's going to be challenging because it's very rare to have someone in Brazil using Discord, but I'm up for that, because if I see people installing Discord and using it, it's going to, the engagement level is so high that even if it's like 1% of people who are doing that, that 1% is very, very engaged with me. So that's my plan. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, Discord, great. Yeah, I quite like Discord. I know it's going to be challenging for some people. Pooja, what's the most surprising lesson you've learned on this community building journey? You know what, Pooja? The funny thing, as I said from the beginning, when I started building this community, eDublin, my one website on community, I wasn't aware that I was building a community. I was just doing it. I was just sharing things. I was using Google Groups, Yahoo Groups, and that was it. Like I didn't know it was a community that was engaging with people and had no metrics, KPIs, anything like that. So I think the biggest learning is that you should just, use metrics to support your ideas and your guts. But if you just do things thinking about metrics first, you're probably going to end up doing something that's not natural to you. And if it's not natural to you, it will come to a point where it's going to be a burn on you. It's going to be painful. It's going to be stressful, and you're not going to enjoy. And because you're not enjoying, you're going to reflect that on the community. Because remember, everything you think, speak, and do builds perception, and that perception is going to be seen by community. and they're going to abandon. And that's why you see a lot of brands not really doing well, because they're literally just abandoning. They're like putting people who are not passionate, and they're not going to build. They're not going to build. That's that. Do you see any tool for WhatsApp? Do you use any tool? No, I don't. I don't use any tools for WhatsApp business. No. Okay. So let's see. We have probably like 1 minute left, and I think I have to go. So again, thank you, Mac. Thank you, Jacob, for the invite. Hope this was helpful to you guys. And if you have any questions, feel free to follow me on LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever, and ask questions there. Okay. Cool beans.